minister in the first years of his reign was a generous man who loved lavish parties.
Hello out there, and welcome everybody to 2K Sports. The location has changed for Game 3 of these conference finals, but the teams are the same, which would make sense in the series, including R2, Witherson, Ernie Johnson, Shaquille O'Neal, and Kenny Smith. Our game tonight featuring the Cleveland Cavaliers as they go up against the Detroit Pistons. Looking at the Pistons, they lost Game 2 in a close one. Sometimes a random bounce can make the difference, but they're looking to take matters into their own hands tonight. Well, after losing the first two games on the road, the alarm bells starting to sound. Would you agree, Kenny, that this is a crucial game for them if they're going to battle back in the series?
Yeah, some guys play much better at home than they do on the road. So they need some home cooking tonight, and this crowd has got to give them a big burst of adrenaline.
You know, if you listen to everybody else, especially the so-called experts, they think it's over. They're not out of it yet. Yes, they're up against the ropes, but only one thing to do, Kenny, come out swinging, knock out blows. Tonight is a game they got to win at all costs.
Very, I would say that it sounds like you guys have been there and done that when you discuss being in the situation.
You know what? I just used to hate some of my teammates that only play well at home. You know, some of them used to wear their practice home jersey under their away jersey so they can get some wins on the road.
Well, I'm actually 1-5 of being 0-2.
The meal was accompanied with music
6 times.
commissioned by
Congratulations to you.
The last time in Dallas in the finals,
After
we were
dinner,
0-2.
there was a promenade through the chateau's gardens. The
Oh, that was
grounds
right.
and
Well,
fountains
so what do you say? You just give up when you're down
were to
0-2?
be the inspiration
No, I didn't give
for
up.
Versailles.
Okay, good. Whatever.
Fouquet
In the words of jocks across America, I got mine.
The geometrically aligned
Time
arrangements
for
of
tip-off
shrubbery
as we
and
send it to
flower
Kevin
beds.
Harlan for the call.
Arriving at the gardens
heard you talking
canals,
about the finals.
they witnessed a fireworks display which was followed by the performance of Molière's play. The party ran well into the night, and everyone agreed it was the most amazing affair they had ever attended. The next day, Fouquet was arrested by the king's head
Eastern Conference
musketeer,
Finals action.
D'Artagnan.
Boy, and a 2-0
months
series
later,
thus
he
far.
went on
Who will
trial
take Game
for
3?
stealing
We're
from
going to
the
find
country's
out here.
treasury.
Live on 2K Sports,
Most of the stealing
bringing you
he
the
was
NBA
accused of,
playoffs.
he had done
I'm
on the
Kevin
king's
Harlan
behalf
alongside Clark
with
Kellogg
the king's
and Greg Anthony.
permission.
We'll see
Fouquet
Cleveland
was found
taking on
guilty
the
and
Detroit
sent to the
Pistons.
most isolated prison in
Take a look at the
France,
Pistons.
high in the
They need the
Pyrenees
boost here from the
Mountains,
hometown
where he
fans,
spent the
trailing
last
2-0.
20
It
years
is
of his
critical
life
for them
in
to start to
solitary
edge back into this series.
And guys, losing this one would be devastating. For all intents and purposes, this game is a must-win. You really have to treat it like a game set.
Exactly. Back on their home court, it's their chance to change the momentum in the series. But you're right, you can't go down 3 games to none and expect to come back and win the series.
And look at the starters for the Cavaliers. Little General in a shooting guard. Tristan Thompson is out there with Kenneth Faried. Then there's Irving. And it's James in at the small forward. Here's Jackson. Tristan Thompson picking up that last bucket.
Well, Merry Christmas. That was a freebie.
Straight into Louis' hands. With the money, Louis built a palace even more magnificent than Fouquet's, the glorious Palace of Versailles. He used the same architects, decorators, and garden designer. And at Versailles, Louis hosted parties even more extravagant than the one that cost Fouquet his freedom. Let us examine the situation. The evening of the party, as Fouquet presented spectacle on spectacle to Louis, each more magnificent than the one before, he imagined the affair as demonstrating his loyalty and devotion to the king. Not
Outside
only did
Irving.
he think the party would put him back in the king's favor, he thought it would show his good
Here's
taste,
Little
his
General.
connections, and
A three-pointer,
his
no good.
popularity, making him
Here are the Pistons with the ball.
and
Look to start a new streak after losing on Monday.
Throughout the first half, even into the third quarter, they had the game man. They just fell apart, collapsed in the fourth quarter. They should not have lost this game.
I really think that they thought the game was over. And oftentimes, as soon as you start to look ahead, you lose that momentum. And then you can't recover. And that seems to be the case.
Here's Irving. After the made shot from Andre Drummond. No good from Little General.
You can't miss those, but even the best do on occasion.
Who had inadvertently
Jackson with it.
Such
Drummond the
is
screen.
fate in some form or other
Pass to
of
Patterson.
those who
And the
unbalance
rejection
a
by
master's
LeBron.
sense of self. Poke
In
holes
transition,
in
here
his
come the
back, or
Cavaliers.
make him doubt his
The kick out to
preeminence.
Fareed. And the pass to Little General.
Observance of the law.
The
In the
tray.
early 1600s,
Rebound,
the Italian
Detroit.
astronomer
They're 1 of 4 here to start, looking to get into a flow offensively.
He depended on the generosity
Patterson.
of great rulers to support his research. And so, like
feeds it
all
to Harris.
Renaissance scientists, he would sometimes make gifts of his inventions and
Here's Caldwell
discoveries
Pope.
to the leading
6 on the shot
thinkers
clock.
of the time. Once,
Detroit
for
needs to get off the
instance,
shot.
he presented a military
Patterson can't
compass
get it to
he
go.
had invented to the
You know what,
Duke
though?
of
Sometimes
Gonzaga.
you can be too
Then,
open. I
he
think it may have
dedicated a book
surprised him, and that's
explaining
why
the
he
use
missed.
of the compass to the Medicis.
And Fareed kicks to Irving.
Rulers were grateful, and through
Shot
them,
to stop the
Galileo
drought.
was able
No
to
one
find
here.
more
James as he
stars
lets
to
it go.
teach.
Yes,
No matter
it's
how
Irving
great the
picking up the
discovery,
assist.
however,
Don't take
his
your eyes off of
patrons
him
usually
because
paid
he
him
can
with
make
gifts,
plays from multiple
not
spots on the
cash.
floor. Put the
This
isolated
made for
cam
a
on.
life of constant insecurity.
Jackson dishes to Drummond.
There must be an easier way.
Kicks it to Caldwell Pope. Nice ball movement by
Galileo
Detroit.
hit on a
Jackson
new
passes to
strategy
Drummond.
in 1610 when he discovered the moons of Jupiter.
And down
Instead
it
of
goes.
dividing the
Jamming that one
discovery
home.
among his patrons,
And the defense
giving
out
one
of
the
position
telescope he had
on that
used,
possession,
dedicating a
which
book to
allowed for
another,
him to
and
get that
so on.
offensive board.
Well said. Yes, he did. You're right, Greg. That's a tremendous jam on the football.
What a great nose for the basketball he has, and such a strong finisher as well. Great assist that time by Kyrie Irving.
Established the Medici dynasty in 1540. He had named Jupiter the mightiest of the gods, the Medici symbol. A symbol
Different look here for Detroit.
that went
Johnson
beyond
comes in for Patrick Patterson.
one
And
link
Sessions
of
subbed in
ancient
for Caldwell
and
Pope.
its
And
divinities.
Cleveland also making a change.
Galileo
Let's check in
turned
for
his
Tristan
discovery
Thompson.
of Jupiter's
The Pistons
moons
leading.
into a cosmic event honoring the Medici's greatness.
And first quarter, we're about 3.5 minutes in.
He announced
Sessions
that
kicks
the
to
bright
Harris.
stars, the moons
Good
of
D by
Jupiter,
LeBron.
offered
And
themselves
this
in
is
the
why you
heavens
need
to his
good defenders
telescope at the
on
same
the
time
interior
as
to
Cosmos
contest shots.
II's
Yeah, Greg, making every shot a hard one, even the shots in close.
Now here's Jackson.
harmonized with the number
Following
of
the miss by J.R.
Cosmo
Smith.
II had 3 brothers, and that the moons orbited
To the
Jupiter
inside,
as these
and
4
stolen by
suns
Harris.
revolved around Cosmo I.
Here's Johnson. So the whistle blows on the shot and 2 free throws for the contact right there.
Themselves reflected the ascendancy of the Medici family. After he dedicated the discovery
The
to
Pistons shooting their first free throws of the
Galileo
evening.
commissioned an emblem representing Jupiter sitting on a cloud with the 4 stars circling about him, and presented this to Cosimo II as a symbol of his link to the stars.
gentlemen, 2 shots.
In 1610, Cosimo II made Galileo his official court
And he makes the
philosopher
first.
and
Different look here for
with a
Detroit.
full salary. For a scientist, this was the coup of a
And
lifetime.
well, Detroit
The days
shooting
of
only
begging
31%
for
for
money
offense,
were
really
over.
struggling to put possessions together. And a
Interpretation.
chance here presented by Gatorade to see who's on the floor, all fueled up and ready to go for the start of the second quarter.
Years of begging. The reason was simple. All
And you talk
masters
about
want to appear
momentum.
more brilliant
That sort of
than other
action
people.
delivers a type of energy
The
to your
producer of a
team
great work
that you
wants
just
to feel
can't
he's
quantify.
more
You know
than
what? I'm
just
going to
the
quantify it
provider of
right now,
finance.
Clark. And this is a close game, and that was something special.
And really,
Good
in
try.
a game,
Important than the work
you guys,
produced.
in a game like this, though, when you have a chance to send a message, you do. And
Galileo did not challenge on the intellectual
And the
authority of the
highlight
Medici
reel
for his
replay
discovery,
brought to you
or
by
make them feel
Kia.
inferior
Good stuff on
in
that
any way
Kia Slam
by
Cam.
literally
Let's check out
aligning
what
them
Doris
with the
Burke has
stars.
for us.
He made
Well,
them
Kev,
shine
in the last matchup
brilliantly.
against the Pistons, put on a show. He ended with 22 points, and did he ever have active hands-on defense? Stealing, blocks, both were a part of his game that night. His play was a big part of why their team was able to
When it
maintain
comes to
their hot
power,
streak.
come
All right, thanks so much, Doris. What a great report, and what a jaw-dropping performance that was, guys.
I couldn't believe what I was seeing. He's given himself a hard act to follow here tonight.
You know what? But as good as he was, it's hard to think there won't be at least some sort of carryover effect, guys. I mean, he still has to be riding pretty high.
Cleveland needs to get a shot off here. And they'll turn it over. Could not get off the shot. 24-second violation. Jackson, he's checked in for the
It is
Pistons.
a deadly but common misperception
second with about a minute and a half gone by.
But at his first opportunity, he will replace you with someone less intelligent, less attractive, less threatening.
Down low, here's Patterson. It's good. The assist was from Jackson. Jackson's got 3 assists in the game. Irving with it. Starting now by Jackson.
Find an excuse to rid himself of your presence.
Irving against Jackson.
This
To end the run. Go to the line.
First, you can
And really, the defense fouling there to prevent the layup, but that's exactly what you need to do.
There are
It is.
masters
I mean,
who are
no
more
reason to back
insecure
off and
than
give him the
others.
layup. I mean, much better off
Insecure.
making him go to
You
the
may
line.
naturally outshine them
And
by your
that's it,
charm
guys, in the
and
hustle
grace.
squad.
No one had more natural talents than Astore Manfredi, Prince of Faenza. The most handsome of all the young princes of Italy, he captivated his subjects with his generosity and open spirit. In the year 1500, Cesare Borgia laid siege to Faenza. When the city surrendered, the citizens expected the worst from the cruel Borgia, who, however, decided to spare the town. He simply occupied its fortress, executed none of its citizens, and allowed Prince Manfredi, 18 at the time, to remain with his court in complete freedom. A few weeks later, though, soldiers hauled Astore Manfredi away to a Roman prison. A year after that, his body was fished out of the river Tiber, a stone tied around his neck. Borgia justified the horrible deed with some sort of trumped-up charge of treason and conspiracy. But the real problem was that he was notoriously vain and insecure. The young man was outshining him without even trying. Given Manfredi's natural talents, the prince's mere presence made Borgia seem less attractive and charismatic. The lesson is simple. If you cannot help being charming and superior, you must learn to avoid such monsters of vanity. Either that, or find a way to mute your good qualities when in the company of a Cesare Borgia. Second, never imagine that because the master loves you, you can do anything you want. Entire books could be written about favorites who fell out of favor by taking their status for granted, for daring to outshine. Knowing the dangers of outshining your master, you can turn this law to your advantage. First, you must flatter and puff up your master. Overt flattery can be effective, but has its limits. It is too direct and obvious, and looks bad to other courtiers. Discreet flattery is much more powerful. If you are more intelligent than your master, for example, seem the opposite. Make him appear more intelligent than you. Act naive. Make it seem that you need his expertise. Commit harmless mistakes that will not hurt you in the long run, but will give you the chance to ask for his help. Masters adore such requests. A master who cannot bestow on you the gifts of his experience may direct rancor and ill will at you instead. If your ideas are more creative than your master's, ascribe them to him in as public a manner as possible. Make it clear that your advice is merely an echo of his advice. He must appear as the sun around which everyone revolves, radiating power and brilliance, the center of attention. If you are thrust into the position of entertaining him, a display of your limited means may win you his sympathy. Any attempt to impress him with your grace and generosity can prove fatal. Learn from Fouquet or pay the price. In all of these cases, it is not a weakness to disguise your strengths if, in the end, they lead to power. By letting others outshine you, you remain in control instead of being a victim of their insecurity. This will all come in handy the day you decide to rise above your inferior status. If, like Galileo, you can make your master shine even more in the eyes of others, then you are a godsend, and you will be instantly promoted. Never put too much trust in friends. Learn how to use enemies. Judgment. Be wary of friends. They will betray you more quickly, for they are easily aroused to envy. They also become spoiled and tyrannical. But hire a former enemy, and he will be more loyal than a friend, because he has more to prove. In fact, you have more to fear from friends than from enemies.
Rotate
if you
over
have
and make
no
your presence
enemies,
felt.
find a way to make
Quit being
them.
so soft.
Transgression of the law. In the mid-9th century A.D., a young man named Michael III assumed the throne of the Byzantine Empire. His mother, the Empress Theodora, had been banished to a nunnery, and her lover, Theoctistus, had been murdered. At the head of the conspiracy to depose Theodora and enthrone Michael had been Michael's uncle, Bardas, a man of intelligence and ambition. Michael was now a young, inexperienced ruler, surrounded by intriguers, murderers, and profligates. In this time of peril, he needed someone he could trust as his counselor, and his thoughts turned to Basilius, his best friend. Basilius had no experience whatsoever in government and politics. In fact, he was the head of the royal stables, but he had proven his love and gratitude time and again. They had met a few years before, when Michael had been visiting the stables just as a wild horse got loose. Basilius, a young groom from peasant Macedonian stock, had saved Michael's life. The groom's strength and courage had impressed Michael, who immediately raised Basilius from the obscurity of being a horse trainer to the position of head of the stables. He loaded his friend with gifts and favors, and they became inseparable. Basilius was sent to the finest school in Byzantium, and the crude peasant became a cultured and sophisticated courtier. Now, Michael was emperor, and in need of someone loyal. Who could he better trust with the post of chamberlain and chief counselor than a young man who owed him everything? Basilius could be trained for the job, and Michael loved him like a brother. Ignoring the advice of those who recommended the much more qualified Bardas, Michael chose his friend. Basilius learned well, and was soon advising the emperor on all matters of state. The only problem seemed to be money. Basilius never had enough. Exposure to the splendor of Byzantine court life made him power. Michael doubled, then tripled his salary, ennobled him, and married him off to his own mistress, Eudoxia Ingerina. Keeping such a trusted friend and advisor satisfied was worth any price, but more trouble was to come. Bardas was now head of the army, and Basilius convinced Michael that the man was hopelessly ambitious. Under the illusion that he could control his nephew, Bardas had conspired to put him on the throne, and he could conspire again, this time to get rid of
Kevin, I'm
Michael
here
and
with
assume
LeBron
the
James.
crown
LeBron,
himself.
how were you guys able to make that first
Basilius
half look
poured
so easy?
poison into Michael's
That's not
ear
easy at all.
until
We're
the
just flying
emperor
around helping each
agreed
other
to have his
defensively,
own.
and we're able to get stops and
During
we're
a
able to
great
execute
horse
offensively.
race, Basilius
Disruptive
closed
defense
in
always
on
dangerous.
Bardas in the
LeBron,
crowd
thank you.
and
Kevin?
stabbed him to
Thank you,
death.
Doris, and we'll be back for
Soon
the third
after,
quarter of action
Basilius
following
asked that he
halftime.
replace Bardas as head of the army, where he could keep control of the realm and quell rebellion. This was granted. Now, Basilius's power and wealth only grew, and a few years later, Michael, in financial straits from his own extravagance, asked him to pay back some of the money he had borrowed over the years. To Michael's shock and astonishment, Basilius refused, with a look of such impudence that the emperor suddenly realized his predicament. The former stable boy had more money, more allies in the army and senate, and in the end, more power than the emperor himself. A few weeks later, after a night of heavy drinking, Michael awoke to find himself surrounded by soldiers. Basilius watched as they stabbed the emperor to death. Then, after proclaiming himself emperor, he rode his horse through the streets of Byzantium, brandishing the head of his former benefactor and best friend at the end of a long pike. Interpretation realization. Michael staked his future on the sense of gratitude he thought Basilius must feel for him. Surely, Basilius would serve him best. He owed the emperor his wealth, his education, and his position. It was only on the fateful day when the emperor saw that impudent smile on Basilius's face that he realized his deadly mistake. He had created a monster. He had allowed a man to see power up close. A man who then wanted more, who asked for anything and got it, who felt encumbered by the charity he had received, and simply did what many people do in such a situation. They forget the favors they have received and imagine they have earned their success by their own merits. At Michael's moment of realization, he could still have saved his own life, but friendship and love blind every man to their interests. Nobody believes a friend can betray, and Michael went on disbelieving until the day his head ended up on a pike. Keys to power. It is natural to want to employ your friends when you find yourself in times of need. The world is a harsh place, and your friends soften the harshness. Besides, you know them. Why depend on a stranger when you have a friend at hand? The problem is that you often do not know your friends as well as you imagine. When you decide to hire a friend, you gradually discover the qualities he or she has kept hidden. Strangely enough, it is your act of kindness that unbalances everything. People want to feel they deserve their good fortune. The receipt of a favor can become oppressive. It means you have been chosen because you are a friend, not necessarily because you are deserving. There is almost a touch of condescension in the act of hiring friends that secretly afflicts them. The injury will come out slowly. A little more honesty, flashes of resentment, and envy here and there, and before you know it, your friendship fades. The more favors and gifts you supply to revive the friendship, the less gratitude you receive. All working situations require a kind of distance between people. You are trying to work, not make friends. Friendliness, real or false, only obscures that fact. The key to power, then, is the ability to judge who is best able to further your interests in all situations. Keep friends for friendship, but work with the skill and competence. Whenever you can, bury the hatchet with an enemy and make a point of putting him in your service. Never let the presence of enemies upset or distress you. You are far better off with a declared opponent or two than not knowing where your real enemies lie. The man of power welcomes conflict, using enemies to enhance his reputation as a sure-footed fighter who can be relied upon in times of uncertainty. Law 3. Conceal your intentions. Judgment. Keep people off balance and in the dark by never revealing the purpose behind your actions. If they have no clue what you are up to, they cannot prepare a defense. Guide them far enough down the wrong path, envelop them in enough smoke, and by the time they realize your intentions, it will be too late. Part 1. Use decoyed objects of desire and red herrings to throw people off the scent. If at any point in the deception you practice, people have the slightest suspicion as to your intentions, all is lost. Do not give them the chance to sense what you are up to. Throw them off the scent by dragging red herrings across the path. Use false sincerity, send ambiguous signals, set up misleading objects of desire. Unable to distinguish the genuine from the false, they cannot pick out your real goal. Observance of the law. In 1850, the young Otto von Bismarck, then a 35-year-old deputy in the Prussian parliament, was at a turning point in his career. The issues of the day were the unification of the many states, including Prussia, into which Germany was then divided, and a war against Austria, the powerful neighbor to the south that hoped to keep the Germans weak and at odds, even threatening to intervene if they tried to unite. Prince William, next in line to be Prussia's king, was in favor of going to war, and the Parliament rallied to the cause, prepared to back any mobilization of troops. The only ones to oppose war were the present king, Frederick William IV, and his ministers, who preferred to appease the powerful Austrians. Throughout his career, Bismarck had been a loyal, even passionate supporter of Prussian might and power. He dreamed of German unification, of going to war against Austria and humiliating the country that for so long had kept Germany divided. A former soldier, he saw warfare as a glorious business. This, after all, was the man who years later would say, "The great questions of the time will be decided not by speeches and resolutions, but by iron and blood." Passionate patriot and lover of military glory, Bismarck nevertheless gave a speech in Parliament at the height of the war fever that astonished all who heard it. "Woe unto the statesman," he said, "who makes war without a reason that will still be valid when the war is over. After the war, you will all look differently at these questions. Will you then have the courage to turn to the peasant contemplating the ashes of his farm, to the man who has been crippled, to the father who has lost his children?" Not only did Bismarck go on to talk of the madness of this war, but, strangest of all, he praised Austria and defended her actions. This went against everything he had stood for. The consequences were immediate. Bismarck was against the war. What could this possibly mean? Other deputies were confined to their votes. Eventually, the king and his ministers won out, and war was averted. A few weeks after Bismarck's infamous speech, the king, grateful that he had spoken for peace, made him a cabinet minister. A few years later, he became the Prussian premier. In this role, he eventually led his country and the peace-loving king into a war against Austria, crushing the former empire and establishing a mighty German state, with Prussia at its head. Interpretation. At the time of his speech in 1850, Bismarck made several calculations. First, he sensed that the Prussian military, which had not kept pace with other European armies, was unready for war, that Austria, in fact, might very well win, a disastrous result for the future. Second, if the war were lost and Bismarck had supported it, his career would be gravely jeopardized. The king and his conservative ministers wanted peace. Bismarck wanted power. The answer was to throw people off the scent by supporting a cause he detested, saying things he would laugh at if said by another. The whole country was fooled. It was because of Bismarck's speech that the king made him a minister, a position from which he quickly rose to be prime minister, attaining the power to strengthen the Prussian military and accomplish what he had wanted all along, the humiliation of Austria and the unification of Germany under Prussia's leadership. Through insincerity and misleading signals, he deceived everyone, concealed his purpose, and attained everything he wanted. Such is the power of hiding your intentions. Keys to power. Most people are open books. They say what they feel, blurt out their opinions at every opportunity, and constantly reveal their plans and intentions. They do this for several reasons. First, it is easy and natural to always want to talk about one's feelings and plans for the future. It takes effort to control your tongue and monitor what you reveal. Second, many believe that by being honest and open, they are winning people's hearts and showing their good nature. They are greatly deluded. Honesty is actually a blunt instrument argument which bloodies more than it cuts. Your honesty is likely to offend people. It is much more prudent to tailor your words, telling people what they want to hear, rather than the coarse and ugly truth of what you feel or think. More important, by being unabashedly open, you make yourself so predictable and familiar that it is almost impossible to respect or fear you, and power will not accrue to a person who cannot inspire such emotions. If you yearn for power, quickly lay honesty aside and train yourself in the art of concealing your intentions. Master the art, and you will always have the upper hand. Basic to an ability to conceal one's intentions is a simple truth about human nature. Our first instinct is to always trust appearances. We cannot go around doubting the reality of what we see and hear, constantly imagining that appearances concealed something else would exhaust and terrify us. This fact makes it relatively easy to conceal one's intentions. Simply dangle an object you seem to desire, a goal you seem to aim for, in front of people's eyes, and they will take the appearance for reality. Once their eyes focus on the decoy, they will fail to notice what you are really up to. You can use this tactic in the following manner. Hide your intentions, not by closing up, with the risk of appearing secretive and making people suspicious, but by talking endlessly about your desires and goals, just not your real ones.
We gotta be more
You will
physical on
kill
defense.
3 birds with
They
one
are getting
stone.
to the middle of the
You
floor
appear
way
friendly,
too
open,
easy.
and trusting.
Get
You
into them
conceal
on the
your
perimeter.
intentions, and you
Post.
send your rivals
Rotate
on
over and make your
time-consuming
presence
goose
felt.
chases.
Quit being so soft.
Another powerful tool in throwing people off the scent is false sincerity. People easily mistake sincerity for honesty. Remember, their first instinct is to trust appearances, and since they value honesty and want to believe in the honesty of those around them, they will rarely doubt you or see through your act. Seeming to believe what you say gives your words great weight. To make your false sincerity an effective weapon in concealing your intentions, espouse a belief in honesty and forthrightness as important social values. Do this as publicly as possible. Emphasize your position on this subject by occasionally divulging some heartfelt thought, though only one that is actually meaningless or irrelevant, of course. Napoleon's minister Talleyrand was a master at taking people into his confidence by revealing some apparent secret. This feigned confidence, a decoy, would then elicit a real confidence on the other person's part. Remember, the best deceivers do everything they can to cloak their roguish qualities. They cultivate an air of honesty in one area to disguise their dishonesty in others. Honesty is merely another decoy in their arsenal of weapons. Part 2. Use smoke screens to disguise your actions. Deception is always the best strategy, but the best deceptions require a screen of smoke to distract people's attention from your real purpose. The bland exterior, like the unreadable poker face, is often the perfect smoke screen, hiding your intentions behind the comfortable and familiar. If you lead the sucker down a familiar path, he won't catch on when you lead him into a trap. Observance of the law. In 1910, a Mr. Sam Kiesel of Chicago sold his warehouse business for close to $1 million. He settled down to semi-retirement and the managing of his many properties. But deep inside, he itched for the old days of deal-making. One day, a young man named Joseph Weil visited his office, wanting to buy an apartment he had up for sale. Kiesel explained the terms. The price was $8,000, but he only required a down payment of $2,000. Weil said he would sleep on it, but he came back the following day and offered to pay the full $8,000 in cash if Kiesel could wait a couple of days until a deal Weil seemed reluctant to say and quickly changed the subject, but Giesel was persistent. Finally, after assurances of confidentiality, Weil told Giesel the following story. Weil's uncle was the secretary to a coterie of multimillionaire financiers. These wealthy gentlemen had purchased a hunting lodge in Michigan 10 years ago at a cheap price. They had not used the lodge for a few years, so they had decided to sell it and had asked Weil's uncle to get whatever he could for it. For reasons, good reasons, of his own, the uncle had been nursing a grudge against the millionaires for years. This was his chance to get back at them. He would sell the property for $35,000 to a setup man, whom it was Weil's job to find. The financiers were too wealthy to worry about this low price. The setup man would then turn around and sell the property again for its real price, around $155,000. The uncle, Weil, and the third man would split the profits from this second sale. It was all legal and for a good cause, the uncle's just retribution. Giesel had heard enough. He wanted to be the set-up buyer. Weil was reluctant to involve him, but Giesel would not back down. The idea of a large profit plus a little adventure added champing at the bit. Weil explained that Giesel would have to put up the $35,000 in cash to bring the deal off. Giesel, the millionaire, said he could get the money with a snap of his fingers. Weil finally relented and agreed to arrange a meeting between the uncle, Giesel, and the financiers in the town of Galesburg, Illinois. On the train ride to Galesburg, Giesel met the uncle, an impressive man with whom he avidly discussed business. Weil also brought along a companion, a somewhat paunchy man named George Gross. Weil explained to Giesel that he himself was a boxing trainer, that Gross was one of the promising prize fighters he trained, and that he had asked Gross to come along to make sure the fighter stayed in shape. For a promising fighter, Gross was unimpressive looking. He had gray hair and a beer belly, but Giesel was so excited about the deal that he didn't really think about the man's flabby appearance. Once in Galesburg, Weil and his uncle went to fetch the financiers, while Giesel waited in a hotel room with Gross, who promptly put on his boxing trunks. As Giesel half-watched, Gross began to shadowbox. Distracted as he was, Giesel ignored how badly the boxer wheezed after his style seemed real enough. An hour later, Weil and his uncle reappeared with the financiers, an impressive, intimidating group of men, all wearing fancy suits. The meeting went well, and the financiers agreed to sell the lodge to Giesel, who had already had the $35,000 wired to a local bank. This minor business now settled, the financiers sat back in their chairs and began to banter about high finance, throwing out the name J.P. Morgan as if they knew the man. Finally, one of them noticed the boxer in the corner of the room. Weil explained what he was doing there. The financier countered that he too had a boxer in his entourage, whom he named. Weil laughed brazenly and explained that his man could easily knock out their man. Conversation escalated into argument. In the heat of passion, Weil challenged the men to a bet. The financiers eagerly agreed.
Get the best look.